I think a lot of times when people are sitting in the audience, they're just thinking, can you give me a morsel, something to make my life a little better? You and I have met those people. I'm going to get up on stage and change the world. No, you're not.
No,
There,
no.
I was thinking about this yesterday, and I was going to ask ChatGPT, how many people have really changed the world on an epic scale? It's probably not 100, right?
Yeah,
We're not
yeah.
going to do that. But let's say you can give me an insight that will help my relationship with my partner and my kids, not drastically change it, but make it a little better every day. I'm listening. Those are the insights we need. And you and I and everyone else has those.
That was the voice of author, presentation skills coach, and TEDx coach, Michael Davis. Michael is also the founder of Speaking CPR, where he helps give life to lifeless presentations and stories. He's my guest today on the Page and Stage podcast, and as always, I'm your host, Jason Cannon. Let me tell you a bit more about Michael. He works with speakers and business leaders to increase the impact of their presentations, stories, and speeches. No joke, his clients span 5 continents, and their presentations have been viewed online over 5 million times. Michael is also the author of 7 books on storytelling and speaking, and he feels his calling is to help as many business professionals as possible get their message and their stories out into the world. He lives in Blue Ash, Ohio with his family and the overlords of their house, Sky the Super Chihuahua, and her underling, Riley the Mini Chihuahua. And if you think Michael and I are able to resist trading doggy stories, you are woefully wrong. Here we go with my conversation with Michael Davis. It is my great delight to introduce all of you out there to Michael Davis, who heads up Speaking CPR. I had the great honor of meeting Michael as we both became coaches for In Your Bones strategic storytelling, which I know you'll be hearing more about from me down the road. But Michael agreed to come on today. We're going to talk about his journey to becoming a brilliant professional speaker and speaker teacher. And Michael, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Jason. Before we get started, if you'll just bear with me a second, there's one thing I need to do.
Uh-oh.
Buttigutta. Ha hum. Now, if you're listening to this, you're probably thinking, oh, Jason's guest is having a stroke. No, I'm using tips that Jason has given me to become a better speaker with a better breath and better voice. So thank you for that, Jason.
Oh, you're very welcome, Michael. Thank you for the very strange plug. But yeah, anyone who's out there, I mean, a lot of my listeners, you've all had me in class before. You know what butt is all about, how to, get elocution, all the ridiculous exercises in acting class. But yeah, we'll definitely talk about those too, because we're working together with storytellers who are not professionally trained actors, and that's a whole thing unto itself. We'll get into that, Michael. But first, I need to ask you about, because on your bio, and I don't think I've heard this story yet, you say that you had a humiliating experience in first grade public speaking, and it scarred you for like 25 years. And
Yes.
I think we need to hear this story.
Yes. Well, I was in first grade just a few months after Neil Armstrong had walked on the moon, and I was a huge fan of the space program. One morning in the middle of recess on a rainy day, I decide I'm going to jump up on my desk and practice my astronaut skills. I was having a ball flying to the moon and Mars and everywhere else, but Mrs. North, my teacher, didn't think much of it. She walks into the classroom, looks up and says, Michael, since you love standing on your desk so much, I'm going to let you do it during nap time so everyone gets to see you. Okay. Didn't think much of it until nap time. All right, get up on your desk. I stand up there, and I'm sure you can guess, Jason, my friends didn't sleep that day.
Oh, man.
They did silently taunt me, sticking their tongues out, pointing, laughing, snickering underneath. And that nap time lasted 40 minutes.
Oh, man.
By the time she said, you can step down now, I hope you've learned your lesson. I had. I told myself I will never stand in front of people again. That was awful.
Oh, Mrs. North bringing the heat.
She was bringing the heat. And it was so funny. I told this story about 10 years ago at an event, and some guy came up to me afterward and said, "Do you have Mrs. North at Harrison Elementary in Harrison,
No
Ohio?"
way. No way, Michael. No way.
I said, "Sure did." He said, "She did the same thing to me." I'm like, "Oh my God." So there are two scarred people out here. But that gave me a lesson that said, don't stand in front of people. And I didn't, Jason, for 25 years until, in the ultimate irony, the universe has a great way of playing tricks on it. I became a financial advisor, and I was told, not asked, go out and give these retirement planning workshops. Yeah, that went well.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. Right.
So
You stood
bad.
on the you stood on the desk and people were baffled.
Exactly. I stood up there and people were staring at me like, well, what's this have to do with anything? Well, the stock market goes up, it could go down. Now, I never did that, but I wish I had now that we're talking about it. It would have been a memorable message. But no, I did such a poor job. My boss pulled me into his office one day, and he was a real type A, non-feeling guy. He said, I'm looking at your evaluations here. You're a lousy speaker, and you're not doing the job. You either fix this or we got to let you go. So that led me to Toastmasters 30 years ago, 1994. And that set me on a whole new path.
That's amazing. All right. So I do need to say that, Mrs. North clearly did not watch Dead Poet Society.
No.
Because otherwise, the desk standing may have gone a very different direction for you.
Exactly.
But you mentioned Toastmasters. This is good because this is kind of, if we have a Michael Davis superhero speaker origin story, this was it. This was, getting bitten by the radioactive spider. This moment for you was finding Toastmasters under the threat of being fired.
Yes.
So for those people out there who maybe don't know what Toastmasters is, set that up a little bit. Who are Toastmasters? Who are they?
It's
and then
Sure.
When you joined them, sorry, with two-part question. When you joined them, kind of what was that process like for you? What happened then?
Well, this year, it's its 100th anniversary. It was started in 1924 in California by a man named Ralph Smedley, who was trying to create, and at the time, it was very segregated with the white businessmen, but he brought all these people together to improve their presentation skills. And it just over the years, eventually it opened up to everyone, opened up to women in the 70s, which is fantastic. And it is a global organization, has 300,000 members. The idea is to help people who struggle with presentations and public speaking. It was perfect for what I needed at the time, was to get me standing in front of people. And it taught me three valuable lessons, Jason. Number one, we've all had a bad experience. Number two, we're wired to be afraid of standing in front of people and speaking. It is what our ancestors passed down to us. It was a survival tool. And number three, it's a learnable skill. I had no idea. I had friends who I thought came out of the womb selling the doctor, don't spank me on the butt. And they convinced the doctor not to do it. They were that good. And I thought, I can never do that. It's a learnable skill.
Oh, yeah.
That set me on a path. Now, what I did not remember that first grade incident for years. So I was held back even in this journey through Toastmasters in the early years because I was insecure, fearful. And it wasn't until I remembered that incident that I thought, oh, she was the one who was wrong, not me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it took me a good decade to really start to get rid of fear and negativity and the imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And once I did, I thought, man, I can be pretty good at this. And then people would start coming to me for feedback. And that's when I started thinking about becoming a coach in addition to a speaker.
Awesome.
And it was around the time I also found the National Speakers Association, which helped me start to build a business and not just stand up and speak for no fee.
Yeah, Toastmasters, for everyone out there, it's not a paying gig.
No.
But it's like they meet like weekly or bi-weekly, like at a local restaurant or a conference room and practice on each other, right?
Yeah. What I love about it still, and I go because the best place to practice, and as you know, as an actor, nothing replaces repetition. You've got to do the reps. Well, it's better if you do it in front of people.
Yes.
Now,
absolutely.
My chihuahuas make for a good audience when nothing else will do. But even when they're not wagging their tails and they're turning their heads away, it's like, okay, I know this needs work. But
Yeah, talk to me really quick about your Chihuahuas, because I've got my two dogs that everyone is just so sick of me talking about, Gaia and Odin, and they know my storytelling and my playwriting better than anybody. They are always the first audience, and then it's
yes,
Rebecca.
absolutely. Well, I was always a big dog guy. And then about 8 years ago, my partner Linda called me into her office and she said, I want you to look at this. And I look at her screen and I see what looks like an overgrown rat with huge ears. I'm like, what the hell is that? She said, that's a dog we're going to go look at. Oh, okay. I know what that probably means. So we get in the car. Turns out that Sky was a 3-month-old rescue.
Oh,
Who had been
man.
fostered by a family with 3 kids and 3 dogs.
Mm.
Jason, this is like it happened yesterday. The
Oh,
woman
yeah.
walks her out. There's Sky. She's holding Sky. She puts Sky in my hands. Linda takes one look at the dog and looks at me and says, I love her. I'm like, we're taking you home, baby. And
oh, man.
I never liked small dogs until this one, and she is the best dog I've ever had. She is so sweet. As we were talking about earlier, unless a rabbit makes its way into the yard, then she becomes, as you described, the Hulk.
Yeah. It's so interesting, Michael, because you talk to anyone who has dogs or pets, right? But especially that rescue angle, that story, because this is the whole point of the podcast, right? Is exploring the power of storytelling. And I'm sitting here just smiling and giggling maniacally as you tell your story, because I can't help but think of the first time Rebecca and I met Gaia, or when we went and got Odin, right? And with Gaia, it was a thing where the family just couldn't handle her anymore. And so we went to meet her. And, you know, Rottweilers are assessors. They're defenders. They stand to the side and side eye you until they figure things out. So there's like a bunch of people in the room and Gaia's in the corner going, something's up. So finally everyone else leaves and just leaves Rebecca and me in the room with Gaia. And this is a 70-pound Rottweiler. We figured we were going to be getting a small dog. So Rebecca and I just very gently sit on the floor and ignore her and just talk to each other. And after about 6-7 minutes, Gaia works her way over and kind of licks my shin and then kind of lays down and puts her head on Rebecca's leg. And that was it.
That was it. That's it.
Right. And we were still super nervous. We went back the next day and they gave me the leash. She's on the leash with me. We're walking to my car. And I wasn't convinced to the moment I opened the back door and just went, up you go. And she looked at me and jumped right in and sat there with that big rowdy smile, just panting. And that was the moment I knew, oh, we're going to be fine.
Yeah.
Right. But even the way I'm having to frame this, and I could tell you the story of Odin. You could tell me the story of your other mini Chihuahua. What was their name?
Riley. Sky Riley.
That's right. But even the way we are wired, you mentioned the way we're hardwired evolutionarily, Michael. The way we're hardwired to tell these stories, we're developing characters and arcs. We're developing emotional point of view. We're building towards a climax. You know, in your case, it's the moment that your partner looked up and said, I love her, climax. For us, when Gaia finally worked over, licked my shin, put her head on Rebecca's leg, climax, right? We can't help but not tell a story that way. So I would love to throw that back to you, because you mentioned how we're evolutionarily wired to fear speaking as a survival mechanism. Square that circle for me in terms of how we're also instinctively wired to tell a story in such a way that we know who the character is, who the hero is, what the climax is.
Well, it goes back to what our friend Scott uses as the fire. When we sit around the fire and telling each other these narratives, we're wired to be comfortable for that, because that's how our ancestors taught our lessons, our morals, our ethics, and everything that kept the group together. But you didn't want to be the person ostracized from that group, because that meant instant death.
Yeah.
And evolutionarily, we just learned to tell this version of this main character who has this goal, but hits an obstacle. And they do not know how to overcome the obstacle. They try and they try and they try, but ultimately this guide, this guru, whatever term you want to use, this wise person comes in and says, no, here's how you solve the problem. They try the new perspective, the new ideas, and it doesn't happen overnight, but they start to get comfortable with this new method, this new way of doing things, and ultimately they succeed. They hit that climax. And then the real benefit to the story comes in what Joseph Campbell called the return home, when we're sharing the wisdom with others. It wasn't just that I succeeded. If you stop there with your story, that's nice, but what did you learn that you can share with me?
Right.
That's the benefit, the payoff to the audience for giving you their time.
I don't know if you heard that. That was
I
Odin
heard that.
barking
I
at a
love
rabbit. And it was like perfect timing too.
Yeah, you got to leave that in.
Oh, that one will stay in. That's great. Yeah, so you mentioned Scott, and that is Scott Mann, who heads up the group I mentioned earlier, In Your Bones Strategic Storytelling, and he's kind of the lead coach that we work with. Let's talk a little bit about that, Michael, because the people we work with in that particular storytelling enclave, they're not professional actors, they're not professional speakers. They are people just living their lives, but who have a story and who want to wield story as a way to improve their business, their relationships, their public relations. I'd love to hear kind of how you got connected with Scott into this group. And also, when you work with people like this, what is your general approach with them? How do you help them get unlocked so that they no longer have the fear that you went through yourself and can access the power of the story inside them?
Well, first I met Scott I want to say 2017, 2018. He was speaking for TEDx Cincinnati, which was
Right.
one of the better TEDx's at the time. I was pure luck. I got assigned to work with him. And I knew instantly that I just love this guy. I mean, I've
Yeah.
worked
Oh,
with a
yeah.
Hall of Fame football player before that. And I learned that when you have people that achieve at a high level, like this football player and Scott, the retired Green Beret, you don't have to ask them twice to do something. It was such a
Yeah.
joy to work with him on that level. But he taught me as much as I taught him, probably more, because he's done such a deep dive into this topic and his experience working with tribes in Afghanistan and what he discovered about how to connect with them because socially they're a whole different culture. I mean, I had no idea until I met Scott. And it's given me a different perspective on storytelling. You know, when he's talking to Afghan tribal leaders about his family farm and showing how that was a connecting point when they had nothing else in common, that was an eye opener for me.
Yeah.
He's taught me at least as much about storytelling as I ever gave to him. But it's been so symbiotic
Yeah.
because coming to Rooftop or In Your Bones, I mean, he's got different terms he uses for all his programs. The first step when I'm working with someone is to get them to understand you do not have to be newsworthy to have an impactful story. In
That's great.
fact, it's the less newsworthy stories that stick. I love a good adventure about somebody climbing to the top of Everest despite being blind in the unexpected storm that hits, or the gold medalist who overcame all those obstacles, but I can't relate. What I can relate to is the person who is struggling to build a business, deal with a family issue,
Yeah.
overcome financial obstacle. I've been through all those. And when I hear those stories, like your story, when Gaia, is Gaia male or female?
Oh, she's the goddess of the earth.
Okay. Gaia the goddess, when she put her head on your partner's leg, I was there. I had an emotional reaction because that's what dogs generate. Those everyday experiences. That's what connects us. I think a lot of times when people are sitting in the audience, they're just thinking, can you give me a morsel, something to make my life a little better? You and I have met those people. I'm going to get up on stage and change the world. No, you're not.
No.
I was thinking about this yesterday and I was going to ask ChatGPT, how many people have really changed the world on an epic scale? It's probably not 100, right?
Yeah.
We're not
Yeah.
going to do that. But let's say you can give me an insight that will help my relationship with my partner and my kids, not drastically change it, but make it a little better every day. I'm listening. Those are the insights we need. And you and I and everyone else has those.
I love what you're saying there. I can even think of it. Here's a left field example to prove your point. Star Wars, right? What is our entry point into Star Wars? It's C-3PO and R2-D2. They're the first characters we really meet, and they're the observers. They're not powered by the Force. They're not in the Senate. They're not a galactic Sith Lord, right? They're just robots, people, droids trying to survive the chaos going around them. And of course, Lucas took that from Akira Kurosawa and Joseph Campbell and all that stuff, of course. But the idea of our entry point is not the king, but rather the common person. I agree with you. I think a lot of storytellers lose sight of that. They feel a pressure that they have to tell the epic story when in fact the daily grind is going to connect to far more people on a far deeper level.
I appreciate that on so many levels, Jason, because I was sitting in a theater in 1977 watching the original, and I've watched everything and I'm a fan. I never considered the fact that two ordinary droids are our entree into this world, but they are. That
Yeah.
was a brilliant move by George Lucas.
Let's go back because we're both working with Scott now. We have these high level people we work with, but you mentioned at some point you shifted from specifically Toastmasters, and now you work with out of the National Speakers Association. Could you talk a little bit about the National Speakers Association and how that helped launch you into being not just an enthusiast for public speaking, but like made it your entire career?
Yes, it's a 50-year-old organization. It was started by people in the 70s who realized that professional speaking was not really an industry or a profession. It was just people going out and getting paid. And they said, we need to create some ethics and kind of a professional standard.
Yeah.
And that's what they created. And there are, I think, 38 chapters across the country. There's a Canadian version. There's a European version. What it's designed to do is help people on the business side of speaking. They will work with you somewhat on the skill level, stories especially, but it's designed to help people grow a business, whether it's speaking, coaching, training. That's what they're designed to do. And I'm actually one of the members of the leadership team in the Ohio chapter, or actually it's called association. It's a joy because I've discovered in the speaking world that this industry is full of people who do not compete in a cutthroat manner. They help each other. There are 266,000 events a year in the United States alone that need speakers. We're not going to get 0.001% of all those. We have to help each other because it opens doors for one another. It helps build the reputation of the industry. It's a fantastic organization. It helps people build the speaking and training, coaching businesses.
That's amazing. I'm going to have to go look them up.
Yeah. I've heard stories of how cutthroat acting can be in selling. My old world of financial planning, it can be cutthroat. This is not. This is not that way at all.
Well, I think it goes what you say. It's partly just supply and demand. If there's, 250,000 speaking engagements per year, and the speakers are going to help each other find them. On the acting side, I can speak from experience. There's a cast of 10, 200 people go out for it. It's the exact opposite of what you just explained.
Yeah.
Exact flipped.
Now, I won't lie to you. There are many of us who will sit in an audience and see a speaker who's getting paid a pretty hefty amount and think, better than that guy.
Really? Him? Her?
And the hardest lesson I had to learn was it wasn't the speaking skill. They're better marketers.
Oh, yeah. See, and that
marketed themselves.
That even goes back to the story too, right? That what is marketing other than the story you tell to the potential buyer?
Exactly.
Right? Michael, so we were just talking about National Speakers Association and the business side of speaking and growing a business, and your particular coaching business is Speaking CPR. And I went and I signed up, and I get your emails, and one of your items is the 52 storytelling insights. So I just want to give you a long runway here, and just how did Speaking CPR come to be? What is your kind of personal mission? What is is it coaching? Is it a one-on-one? Is it teaching groups or seminars? And then what are the 52 storytelling insights? People should go sign up for them and get them in their inbox. But tell us about where that came from, how you conceptualized it, what they are, how we can access them. So first, what is Speaking CPR? And then second, what is your 52 storytelling insights?
Speaking CPR was born out of the fact that my initials are MD.
I never put that together. Oh, no. Over my head, Michael. Oh, no.
And when you've got a name like Michael Davis, that's about as ordinary as it gets. And I thought, I had a couple doctor clients at the time when I was a financial planner, and I ran this idea by him. I said, look, I admire you as a doctor, but you did it the wrong way. I said, what are you talking about? I said, you went to school for 12 years. I just got given the initials MD when I was born. I took care of all that. But okay, it's an ordinary name. And I played around with that speaking MD. Kind of works. But speaking CPR just came to me one day. I was talking with a group of friends and I said, what do you think of this idea for a company name? Now, the tagline is what had to sell it. So the tagline that's evolved over the years is I give life to lifeless presentations and business stories.
Mm.
That's the response I often get. It stands out. But that the tagline is something you have to play with. So speaking CPR, I've often gotten, are you a doctor? Well, I am an MD.
Yeah, right.
Not the kind you think. Now, that was the start of that. It was back in 2011. I started this business extremely part-time, an hour or two on the weekends. But in the back of my mind, Jason, I always knew this is what I meant to be doing.
Yeah.
I was a good financial advisor, but I didn't have the passion for it. And the more I got involved in this, and I got certified as a coach by a gentleman named Craig Valentine, one of the best speakers on the planet, and also one of the best coaches. Got certified through his training course. And in 2013, he and I were talking, and he was telling me about these tips he had called 52 speaking tips. I'm like, well, he doesn't have storytelling tips. So very quietly, I went to GoDaddy and I looked it up, and sure enough, 52 storytelling tips was available. So I went and I got them. And I called him up a week later and said, Craig, you never got 52 storytelling tips, did you? He said, oh, I should do that. I said, well, you should have, because you can't. He's like, oh, man. That was the original. He inspired it. And I don't know if he invented it or not, but the idea was on a weekly basis, give people some insights into speaking and storytelling. And I focus on the story. In the old days of marketing, the thought was you've got to touch people 7-8 times before they really start to listen.
Right.
Well, you touch somebody 52 times a year, you're going to get on their radar somehow. And that's where that started. And eventually I changed it to insights because people are sick and tired of tips.
Yeah.
Insights is a little different. Also, I never asked somebody to sign up for my newsletter because when I'm sitting in the audience and somebody says, you want to sign up for my newsletter? Oh, yeah, that's what I need. Another item in my mailbox.
Yep.
So I never sell the newsletter or the insights. It's the benefit. You're going to become a better storyteller. You're going to attract more clients. You're going to be more charismatic. You're going to connect with people deeper, whatever the end benefit is. That's where that all started. And eventually those tips became a book called The Book on Storytelling.
Okay.
Well, I've recently gone through an upgrade of the insights because they were over 10 years old and I've gotten all kinds of, I didn't know Scott Mann. I didn't know all these different people that have given me these new insights. So I've upgraded the insights, and I'm not going to turn those into another book, but I do have another book in the works that's very different. The first one is it's a resource. It wasn't just my information. I was send people in that book to all kinds of other speakers and trainers because I just wanted them to have a resource they could go to. That was the origins of that. Since then, I've gotten my own book because I have my own process for storytelling that I use, and I want to get that out into the world.
Yeah. Great. So if people want to go check out Michael Davis's books, plural, are you is it on Amazon? Can we find you online or on your own website?
The Book on Storytelling. It's on Amazon. And I also have a series of Kindle books called Sail This. I have to remember. It's been since I've looked at it.
I'll put the links directly into the show notes so people can access them directly. I just wanted to make sure to know where to go find them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, they're on Amazon.
Great. So give me one or two memorable moments in terms of speaking CPR, a client or a moment you had a breakthrough, or like you mentioned Scott Mann teaching you something. What are some of those memorable moments being a speaking storytelling coach that really, you mentioned that even when you were just working an hour or two per weekend, you knew this was it. This was the lane. I would love to hear about when that lane fully manifested and what were some of the key moments that got you there.
One of the early lessons was when I worked with a client named Patty, one of my first clients. She was the president of a local foundation, extremely successful. She and her husband, they had sold their business, retired. They were doing just fine. She, as head of this foundation, had been given the task of going out and speaking in the community. And when I met her, she was reluctant because 3 months earlier, she'd had an embarrassing situation in front of a local Rotary. I mean, it wasn't just her being melodramatic. I talked to people that were there. They said, "Oh, it was bad." It really,
no.
She was scared to give this next one because this was in front of 450 people, big hitters in the community, and it could be a great way to raise funds. But she had to nail this thing. First 2-3 weeks, and we only had 60 days to get ready. First 2 or 3 weeks, we got along, but I told her at one point, "You got to fire me." "You mean you got to fire you? I really like you." I said, "I like you too, but every time we get together, you've changed everything we've done. You got to stop doing that." And I don't think I'm the right person. And then she finally said those words, Jason, that every man has heard. "It's not you, Michael. It's me." "Sure, Patty." Now, she said, "I have so many ideas and I'm so scared because of what happened. I have so much I want to get to people in 25 minutes. And I said, "Well, that's the first problem. You can't jam 30 years of experience into 25 minutes. We got to give them one idea. I promise you this process works, but you got to stick to it." That fear of having to go back and find somebody else and the clock ticking scared her into saying, "Okay, I'll stick to it." And she did. And the night of the event, 450 people in that room, she got done in 25 minutes, which was a first for her by her own admission. Secondly, we had set a target. Boy, if we could get $20,000 tonight, it'd be really good. When it was over, people stood up. Yeah, they applauded, but they also got in line. And I watched this. I was in the back of this big room. When the last person had left, she came running back. She said, "Oh my God, you're not going to believe this, Michael. We wanted to get $20,000 tonight. My assistant just added up the checks. We've gotten $63,400.
Wow.
I'm like, "You've got to be kidding me." And I knew this, but I thought, wow, this stuff really works.
I'm actually really good at this.
But when you put it into practice, she tripled what we hoped for. Now, here was the best part of that story. She said, "I can't wait to do this again."
Oh, see, there you see, turn the corner.
That's it. That's the new life she's living. I'm happy for the money, but wow, I can't wait to do this again. That was powerful.
Yeah, I think that's so important, Michael, because it's so much about mindset, right? You can have one success, fine. Teach a man to fish, blah, blah, blah. But it's not, it's a cliche because it's true. You didn't just give her a fish, you taught her how to fish. And now she's out there, doing it on her own and eager to.
Yeah.
Eager to.
18 months after that, we were having a catch-up lunch. We hadn't talked in a while. I said, "Yeah, you doing any speaking?" "Oh my gosh, am I out speaking?" She said, "I was put in charge of a team to go out and raise money for a new Boys and Girls Club here in the community. Michael, we've raised $1.1 million.
Oh my gosh.
I'm looking for opportunity. I'm out there. I love this. Now, this is a woman who a year and a half earlier said, "I'm sick to my stomach, can't sleep. I wish I'd never agreed to do this."
Yeah.
To me, that's the victory. The money is fabulous. I love that they got the money, but the money happened because, as you said, the shift of mindset.
Yeah.
I didn't do that. I gave her the tools, and you get this because I know you're a fantastic coach. I love it. It's very, what am I trying to say? I appreciate it when people say nice things about my coaching, but I remind them, look, my coaching means nothing if you don't do the work.
Exactly. Yep.
I can give you all the tools in the world, but if you just sit there, it's like, you did it. I just kind of pushed you along and guided you when you needed it. And you saw Scott become a great actor that way.
Yeah. You mentioned something that I think is so, so important. We were just talking about this actually last week on a call with that In Your Bones team, and we were focusing a little bit on social media. And I love what Scott calls it. Man, I need to let Scott know he's being mentioned a lot in this particular episode.
Maybe we just need to stop talking about him, right?
Yeah, we should just we're pretty cool too. And he mentioned, and I agree with this, that social media in terms of a message it is not an arena for free or open speech or dialogue. It is a killing field.
Oh,
and I couldn't agree more. And so many of the people that I work with, and I think you probably go through this too, you just mentioned it with Patty, is that the temptation is to cram everything in to your speech or your messaging.
Yes.
Because we all have so much, and we think the quantity is what's going to make us be seen as the expert, when in fact it's the exact opposite. It is the quality of the singular thing that you can offer the experiential moment in that speech or that story.
Yeah.
The one thing, when I was in script analysis class, learning, doing my directing MFA, it was always about, when you do your analysis, the ultimate goal is that you can come up with a one sentence event. The play is one thing. And if you can tie every other choice you make to that one event of the play, you're going to have a clear and pointed and effective production. I mentioned Star Wars earlier. So that's a great example, right? If you were to ask someone, what's the story of Star Wars? You could say something about Luke does this, or Darth Vader does that, or Obi-Wan does this, or Han Solo that. But the event of, and I'm just talking about the first movie now, because, is it 3 movies? Is it 6? Is it 9? But the event of Star Wars: A New Hope, Episode 4, the event is actually quite simple. The Republic defeats the Empire, right? And if you boil it down that way, right? Wizard of Oz, Dorothy discovers there's no place like home. That's it. That's the whole story. But everything else supports it, or, is if you think of it as the clothesline, every other thing hanging on there supports that one event. That's a long spin back to what you were just talking about, Patty, and the mistakes so many storytellers make of trying to cram in too much. Exactly. I'm wondering what you think about that.
No, you're right on. There's a term we use called the foundational phrase. We start every speech or story with that because every part of that presentation has to support that foundational phrase. If it doesn't, it's got to go.
Yeah.
Here's the other part of this, to follow up what you were saying about information. I'm constantly teaching my people this. I don't need information. I can get that on this device right here, this phone, faster than you can ever give it to me. And sometimes it's actually correct.
Every once in a while.
But what I need from you is that information I have. I need your spin on it.
Yeah.
And make it relatable to me so I can understand how I can use it in my life. That's it. That's why I tell people that the number one communication asset you have is your story, because nobody can duplicate that.
Yep.
Nobody else has my first grade story. Well, one guy does.
Well, there's probably a whole batch of them out there. You need to find a support group, Michael. I'm sure this sounds like it was a go-to for Mrs. North.
That, or man, just need to find another story, maybe. But no, that is my version of that story. I'm not the only speech coach that has a client that struggled, but I'm the only one that has the Patty story. You have your stories. If you're listening to this, you've got those stories. What my job as a coach is, first and foremost, is to help you see that. There's a group of coaches I'm a part of, aside from what we do with Scott, is called Stage Time University. And we meet once a week virtually, and we have members who come on and we give them feedback on their stories. And I almost never use the word never or always, but always. Every single time we coach somebody, Jason, on these calls, one of the coaches says, "Where was that in the story?" We're too close to our own experience. We don't see the magic or the gold because we lived it. We got through it. I mean, I've talked to people who've had major life issues, health issues, financial, and they said, well, yeah, I tell you where I learned this. My mother was born into German-occupied France, World War II. She was French. And she would tell me these stories of my grandparents when my mom was young, how every day they got up, the question of the day wasn't, what are we going to eat today? It was, are we going to eat today? And they would bundle up their 2 little girls. They would walk them on the cobblestone streets into the nearest town. And they would wait for the German supply trucks to come to feed the German soldiers. And they would pray that potatoes would fall out of some of the sacks and they could pick potatoes up off the ground so they could have soup that day. And my grandfather would walk the streets and he would pick up spent cigarette butts. And he would stick all those in his pocket. And when he got home, he would lay all those out on the kitchen table and he would unwrap them and he might have enough tobacco to smoke 1 cigarette. And my mom is telling me this. Now, at the time, we're sitting in my living room, a mile and a half from a 24-hour Kroger grocery store. 24/7. I can go there anytime I want and get food. I can't conceive of what she just told me. And I said, Mom, how did Grandma and Grandpa do that? I can't conceive of that. She said, no, honey, it's just what we did to survive. She didn't think anything of it, even though it shaped her life. But she just overlooked it. You've had those experiences. I've had them. Everyone has. And that's why you need someone to come in and pull that out. I know you see this as an acting coach. Pull that out of folks.
Michael, we were just talking about the mistake of trying to cram everything in, right? And I know I've been through this with young actors and speakers. You've been through this as you're coaching. When you work with a lot of people, you start to see patterns, things manifest, things keep coming back around. I'm curious, along with this idea of trying to cram in too much, what's another big, common, universal mistake or challenge that starting out speakers tend to have when you first start working with them?
I love this question, and it relates to your world of acting. They speak in monologue versus dialogue,
Oh,
right?
please talk more about that. Dig
Yes,
into that. That's so
it's
good.
facts and figures. So let's go back to my first grade story, for example. I could have told you when I was in first grade, I had this humiliating experience. I got in trouble with my teacher one day during indoor recess, and she made me stand on my desk to punish me. And I tell you what, standing on the desk was the most humiliating experience of my life. My friends, they didn't sleep. They just stared at me and made faces. And when it was over, I got down and I never wanted to speak in front of people again or stand in front of people. Now, factually, what I just told you is the same thing, right? However, I put you into my head, the first version. I gave you a little bit more background, but then I had Mrs. North's dialogue. Well, since you love standing in front of your desk, maybe you do it during nap time so everyone can see you. Yeah, I say it with a certain tone of voice from her. I give you my internal thoughts, character to character dialogue, and that is what brings a story to life. Most people are giving facts, data, and information. Put it on a PDF and I'll read it. We have to bring it to life through that story. And from your world more than mine, actions and reactions tell the story.
Yes.
So it has to be, and you know this, Jason. So many people say, well, you asking me to be an actor? No, I'm asking you to relive that scene as close as you can remember it. And that includes dialogue and reactions and using silence.
Yeah, I think speakers, are afraid of the mask or of thinking that if I overperform, I'm lying, that if I become an actor, that I'm not me anymore. When in fact, step one is as soon as you step on stage, you are no longer just you. You are a quote unquote heightened version of you. Right.
Yes.
So there's even you and me right now, there's Jason, the host, Michael, the guest, and we're pretty just authentic right now, but at the same time, there are roles we are playing. When you step on stage, you've been paid, you've been tapped on the shoulder, you're up there giving a speech, trying whatever for whatever reason, a sermon, raising money, whatever. Suddenly, you're not just Michael Davis, you are Michael Davis, right there. There's a character already on top of you because you've stepped on stage and asserted some kind of authority.
Yeah.
Right. So there's already a mask, and you're going to be way better off if you embrace that than if you try to hold on to some false sense of authenticity that's already been dissipated simply by the context you're in.
Yes, there is a difference in our two worlds from speaking and acting, and I constantly am working with people. This is one of the things I don't like about Toastmasters is this concept of gestures.
Oh,
Gestures are fake and artificial. Now, in acting, I know you need that sometimes, just part of who that character is. But when I'm myself, you're right. I love the word heightened. I have to be a bigger version of myself. What I don't want to do, for example, with the desk story is going to be, I was so distressed, hand on my forehead. And I looked
right.
out and spread my arms, and oh, the children, they were laughing and taunting me. I don't want to go Shakespearean. No, I have to try to become 6 years old again to help you relive that with me. That's the subtlety, and it's subtle.
Yes, I was going to parse that for you right there, because even in the world of acting, what you just did, we call that indicating, right? That's actually not a gesture; it's false, right? Gestures can be true. A physical gesture is the external manifestation of an internal lived experience, right? But it depends on the type of gesture more than just gesturing itself. When you indicate, then you're not actually in the moment. You're not actually engaged in. And this is the term that I use that I think ties to what you are telling your clients is what's the emotional point of view? You're not acting. You're not faking it. But when you were 6, what was your emotional point of view? When your friends pointed at you and laughed at you and stuck out their tongues, how did that actually feel? When you are portraying the character of Mrs. North, What is her emotional point of view? I've got this another brat kid who's trying to one up my authority or trying to distract from class. I've got to go to my go-to.
Yeah,
A
exactly.
good example I give often in my like memoir classes is I tell people to think about, what if you were reading Harry Potter to your 8-year-old niece? You would put on voices, you would heighten the action instinctively. Of course you would, because your goal isn't to simply impart the facts of Harry Potter to your niece. Your goal is to entertain your niece. Your goal is to teach your niece the lessons that are inherent in the story, right? The goal isn't, to your point, what you said earlier, Michael, just facts and figures, the monologue.
Yeah, boring.
Death.
And that checks us out. And because of our addiction to phones now, if we do that, it's the death knell of presentations. I agree with you 100% on reading books to your kids. That can get your kid in trouble, though, because when my son Brendan, who you're going to meet later this year, when he was little, I would read books to him and I would get kind of bored. So I'd read them differently. And sometimes I'd change the ending. So he'd go to school and get into arguments. And I thought, oh, that's my fault.
It reminds me of that episode of Friends where Phoebe's mom would always stop the movie before the bad part. Why don't you want to watch Old Yeller? He doesn't die.
That's right. No. Old Yeller takes off and has a great life after that.
Exactly.
No, it is innate. And I've been fortunate to be surrounded by so many great mentors. And I'm including you in that now because we haven't known each other long, but I've, every day you're in my head. No, it's being willing to expand as a storyteller, as a presenter, as an actor. You can never sit back and say, oh, I got it figured out.
Yeah.
Always be looking. I have had so many great mentors, professional speakers, Hall of Fame speakers, and now an acting coach, a Hollywood scriptwriting consultant, a guy who is now he's in my circle. He has worked with, he's a producer, he's a comedian. He worked with Snoop Dogg and Martha on their show. He was an executive producer. Comedy Central roast. I've been very fortunate. Now, I took advantage of those opportunities when they came up, and I purposely went out and met people, but those opportunities came, and I've been so lucky to meet people like you who've just given me more and more of an education on what this is about, and it never stops.
Yeah.
And that's what's so fun about it. You should never get stale in this world because there's so much more to learn, so many little subtleties.
Michael, this has been so great. I know we were just talking offline. We could geek out on this for hours.
That or Star Wars, either one.
Totally. But I'm going to wrap up with you, and I always like to wrap up with a couple pieces of advice and a spotlight. So, advice number 1: what is the best advice that you have ever taken?
It's all about the reps. Get in there, keep doing it over and over, because stories, speeches evolve. They should never be exactly the same because you're always getting a different perspective, but you only get that through reps.
Yeah, I love this. So I always go to like the pianists doing their scales so they can stop worrying about it later. I think about, how many 3-pointers does Steph Curry take every day? So that in the moment when there's a crowd screaming and a defender in his face, he doesn't have to think about it. He doesn't have to feel. He can just do the thing because he's done it so many times. Similar thing here. I love what you just said. Stories are living. They have to evolve because you've been through this. Every audience is different. Every venue is different. The social, economic, political, whatever cultural climate is constantly evolving, right? Absolutely. Give a speech this week, something happens in the zeitgeist, same speech next week. You better adapt for how people are feeling and thinking about the world.
Oh, yeah. And every time you tell your story, your life experiences give you a different perspective on it. I mean, I see the first grade desk story differently than I did 15 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mrs. North did me a huge favor. I didn't see it for about 30 years, but she did. If I hadn't had that, it was like a rubber band. It stretched me so far one way. When I released it, I came to this far end. It's like, wow, this is a really great career to have.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Advice number 2. What is the worst advice that you have ever given?
I think the worst advice I used to give people was I didn't understand the power of story at the time. And I was just telling them to put as much information in as you can and overload them because I didn't understand. And this was even before cell phones became predominant is that people don't need information. They need perspective. They need you to give them hope that they can get over the problem. And you don't do that with information.
Yeah. Storytelling, acting, whatever, it all comes back to that moment of catharsis, right? When the climax hits, that release, that's the point. And everyone will take their own quote unquote lesson from it, right? All you can do is offer to the best of your ability in that context. But that's what you need to be aiming for, is that moment of the emotional release, not just the intellectual aha, which actually should be more of an emotional aha if it's done right.
Exactly. And you just hit on something really important. Too many speakers I see try to spoon feed the lesson. And
Oh, right.
audiences are far smarter than we give them credit for. They get it.
Yeah.
You just lay the breadcrumbs there. They're going to follow it. And maybe it doesn't always have to be that one specific idea. Maybe they have a little spin-off idea. But as long as they get it, that's what we want them to walk away with.
Yeah. And I found too that audiences like being smart. They don't want to get ahead of you. Jeffrey Sweet, a playwright, came down. I got to work with him on a couple things, and he gave me this great analogy that he uses in his classes, where he'll say to potential playwrights, he'll say, look, 2 + 3 = 5 is obvious. It's easy. You're spoon feeding the audience. All you have to do is withhold a little bit. 2 + X = 5. And now the audience will go, 2 + X, so what is X? Y minus 2? The 3! It's 3! X is 3! And they feel so proud of themselves. But by withholding just a little, you actually get the audience to lean forward and do some of the work, not just for you, but with you.
That makes sense. We tell people frequently, when creating your stories, don't over-describe them. Give just enough detail and let them fill in there. Like those old paint by numbers kits that we grew up with. Give them the outline, let them fill in the colors, because that makes it more vibrant, and it creates more of an emotional connection from their experiences.
Great, Michael. All right. So people who want to track you down, who need to find you online, or want to maybe sign you up as a coach, or find your 52 storytelling insights, where can we find you? What are your websites, your handles, all that good stuff?
SpeakingCPR.com is the website. You can go to 52, the number's 52, storyinsights.com to sign up for those insights. Complimentary, no cost, no obligation. I'm on LinkedIn, Michael Davis. I'm the only one out there. Not.
That's shocking.
Michael Davis, Speaking CPR, you'll find me. And I'm also on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel, speakingcpr.com.
Great. And I'm going to put all those links in the show notes, everybody, so you can check out Michael with just a click. Michael, thank you so much for coming on and geeking out with me and sharing all these awesome insights.
Oh, I look forward to it. Every time I get together with you, it's a joy. You have one of the greatest laughs I've ever heard, and it fills the room, even virtually. I love that.
The Page and Stage podcast is built with Alitu, the all-in-one podcasting app created by the amazing team over at thepodcasthost.com. You can learn more about all my guests and access their websites and projects in the episode summaries. If you enjoyed and found value in this podcast, please tell at least one other person. Word of mouth has always been and will always be the best marketing tool in the world. Thank you for listening, and until next time, I'm Jason Cannon, and I cannot wait to hear your story.